Welcome to Talk Tickers. We're your shortcut for getting straight to the heart of today's earnings call.
Yeah, we cut through the jargon, basically.
Exactly. And today we are diving deep into Amgen's first quarter results for fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, let's unpack what really matters from their call.
Okay, so headline results first. How did they kick off the year?
Pretty strong start, actually. They reported a 9% increase in revenue compared to last year.
Okay, 9%. Solid. But what's behind that number?
Well, what's really interesting is the volume growth. That jumped 14%.
14%. Wow. Okay, so that's suggesting real patient demand for their medicines.
Definitely. It's not just price increases driving it. It's more people actually using their therapies.
And was this broad-based or just one or two drugs?
Well, very broad. They specifically mentioned, I think it was 14 medicines.
14.
Yeah, 14 showing double-digit sales growth. And that's across the board: general medicine, rare disease, inflammation, oncology.
So strength in multiple areas.
Yeah.
That's usually a good sign.
It is. And another key piece here is the biosimilars portfolio.
Right. How's that doing? Always an interesting segment.
Really well. Pulled in over $700 million in revenue this quarter.
$700 million. And the growth rate?
35% year-over-year growth. So a pretty substantial increase.
Okay, 35%. That suggests they're gaining traction with those biosimilar versions.
Yeah, looks like it. Capturing market share there.
All right, let's dig into some of those therapeutic areas. General medicine first. What stood out?
Well, Repatha, their cholesterol drug, is still a big one. Continues to grow.
Still. It's been around a while.
It has, but they mentioned improved patient access is helping. And, it's already a multi-billion-dollar product.
Right. And they still see unmet need there.
They do. They think there's a large sort of underserved population for heart disease that could still benefit.
Okay. And anything new coming through in cardiovascular?
Yeah, they talked about advancing Aplizna. It is in a phase 3 outcomes trial now.
Aimed at that residual risk.
Yeah.
Right. Even after standard treatments.
Exactly that. And then in bone health, Avidity.
Ah, yes. The one that builds bone and slows loss.
That's the one. Pretty unique mechanism. Saw a 29% sales jump.
29%. And they feel that's still got room to run.
Significant untapped potential is how they put it, especially in postmenopausal women at risk of fracture.
Makes sense. Okay, and the big one everyone's watching, Maritide.
Yes, Maritide. Lots of activity there. They've now started phase 3 studies.
For chronic weight management?
Chronic weight management and also obesity-related conditions. They're moving fast.
Based on that phase 2 data we heard about.
Right, which showed, pretty significant and sustained weight loss.
And positive effects on other things too, like cardiometabolic health.
Yeah, those parameters looked good. They also mentioned dose escalation seemed to help with tolerability.
Interesting. More details coming soon.
They said they'll present more at the ADA conference, phase 2 details, and mechanism of action stuff.
Okay, definitely one to keep an eye on. Let's switch over to rare disease. What are the drivers there?
Key drivers are Tepezza, Aplizna, and Tavneos. Amgen sees these as early in their life cycle with long-term growth potential.
Right. And Aplizna had some news recently.
Big news. It got FDA approval as the first and only treatment for IgG4-related disease.
IgG4? That's a pretty rare autoimmune condition, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Affects different organs. They said the early reception has been positive.
Good start. And they're looking at other indications too.
Yes. They filed the phase 3 data with the FDA for Aplizna in generalized myasthenia gravis.
Another autoimmune disorder. Okay, so expanding its potential reach.
Exactly. Now, Tepezza for thyroid eye disease, its sales were a bit impacted this quarter.
Oh. What happened there?
Mainly wholesaler inventory changes, they said, not underlying demand.
So doctors are still prescribing it, access is okay?
Yeah, they highlighted increased prescriber intent and improved access. Underlying demand seems solid.
And they're taking it global too, right?
Right. International expansion is happening, Japan and the EU mentioned specifically.
Okay, let's move to inflammation.
Sure. Testbuyer is the main story here. That's for severe asthma.
Still doing well.
Continues strong momentum, high prescriber confidence. Seems to be performing consistently.
Any pipeline news for Testbuyer?
Yes. Positive phase 3 data in chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyps.
Okay, so another potential indication.
Potentially. And they've also kicked off 2 phase 3 studies in COPD.
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That's a huge area.
Massive patient population globally, yeah.
All right, oncology. What's happening there? Seems like a busy area for them.
Very busy. Their BITE platform, that's the bispecific T-cell engagers, is advancing well.
Moving into earlier lines of treatment, too, I heard.
Yeah, movement into frontline treatment. And they got FDA breakthrough therapy designation for subcutaneous blinatumab.
Subcutaneous, so under the skin injection instead of IV.
Exactly. For B-cell LL, that could be a significant convenience improvement.
Definitely. And what about Melta? There was some buzz around that.
Huge news, really. Melta showed an overwhelming survival benefit, their words, in a phase 3 study.
Wow. In which answer?
Second-line small cell lung cancer, compared versus standard chemotherapy.
That's impressive. When do we see that data?
They said it's being presented at ASCO, the big oncology conference.
Okay. And any other oncology highlights?
The phase 3 study of zilutinib in advanced prostate cancer is enrolling well. So that's progressing.
Good, good. And we mentioned biosimilars earlier, contributing nicely to revenue. Any new launches?
Yeah, successful U.S. launches underway for Pavel Blue, Wesslonna, and Bemke.
Okay. And Pavel Blue got a reimbursement code.
It did, a permanent Q code, which should help with access and uptake.
All right, let's pivot to the financials. You mentioned 11% global product sales growth.
Yeah, 11% global, and even stronger in the U.S. at 14%.
Okay. And operating expenses? R&D?
Non-GAAP operating expenses were up about 4%, pretty controlled, but non-GAAP R&D saw a bigger jump, up 12%.
12% R&D increase. Where's that investment going?
Primarily into those late-stage pipeline assets we talked about, like Maritide and also olpasiran, funding the big trials.
Makes sense. And operating margin?
Still very healthy. Non-GAAP operating margin was 45.7%.
Nearly 46%. Okay, how's the Horizon integration going?
Progressing well, according to plan. They're still expecting about $500 million in pre-tax cost synergies by year-end.
Good. And any updates on debt or cash flow?
They highlighted significant debt reduction, which is good to see after the acquisition, and generated $1.0 billion in free cash flow for the quarter.
Solid cash generation. What about the tax rate?
The non-GAAP tax rate actually decreased a bit, down to 14.6%.
Okay. Any mention of AI or capital return?
Yeah, they mention using AI across the value chain, kind of standard commentary these days.
Yeah.
And they continued returning capital via dividends.
Right. Okay. So looking ahead, do they update their guidance for 2025?
They reaffirmed the main guidance ranges. Total revenue is still expected between $34.3 and $35.7 billion.
And EPS?
Non-GAAP EPS reaffirmed at $20 to $21.20 per share.
So top and bottom line guidance stays the same. Any tweaks elsewhere?
Yes, a notable one on R&D expense. They now expect non-GAAP R&D to grow around 20%.
Wow, up from the 12% this quarter, so an even bigger ramp-up planned.
Seems like it, really leaning into that late-stage pipeline development, especially Maritide, presumably.
Okay. Any other adjustments? Tax rate, operating income.
Non-GAAP other income is now expected around $2.3 billion. And the non-GAAP tax rate expectation was updated slightly to 14.5%, 16%.
Got it. And they flagged something about Wesslonna sales.
Yeah, just noted that U.S. sales for the Wesslonna biosimilar are expected to fluctuate, and they might see no sales in Q2. Just managing expectations there.
Okay, makes sense. And other items like margins, buybacks, free cash flow outlook, mostly unchanged.
Largely unchanged, yeah.
Let's recap some key R&D milestones then. There were quite a few.
Definitely. So we had the FDA approval of Aplizna in IgG4-related disease. That's a big one.
Right.
Positive phase 3 data for rodatinib, and, of course, the Melta survival data in small cell lung cancer.
Huge. And the trial initiations.
Multiple phase 3 trials kicking off for Maritide and obesity and Testbuyer in COPD and nasal polyps.
Okay. What else?
Advancement of the olpasiran phase 3 cardiovascular trial, Ocean A, and the regulatory submission for Testbuyer in nasal polyps is in, with a PDUFA date in October 2025.
So a potential approval later next year.
Correct. And following the Melta results, they're planning to initiate another phase 3 trial, this time in first-line extensive stage small cell lung cancer.
Taking it even earlier in treatment. Ambitious.
Yeah. Plus the breakthrough therapy designation for subcutaneous blinatumab we mentioned.
Right.
Advancement of zelaratamab in prostate cancer, and their biosimilar programs for blockbusters like Opdivo, Keytruda, and Eylea are all moving through phase 3.
Busy pipeline. Any data readouts expected soon?
Yes, baritamab phase 3 data in gastric cancer. Fortitude 101 results expected in Q2 and Fortitude 102 in the second half. Gastric cancer is another large potential market.
Okay, so stepping back, what's the overall picture for investors here?
Well, you've got a strong Q1, clearly driven by volume, which is encouraging. Broad growth across many products.
Right. And that pipeline seems key.
Absolutely. Significant advancements, especially Maritide in obesity, Aplizna in rare diseases, these represent potentially substantial future growth avenues.
Plus the steady biosimilars business.
Exactly. That provides a consistent growing revenue stream, and the increased R&D spend shows they're betting on innovation.
Any headwinds to watch?
Yeah.
Tax, tariffs?
Those are always potential factors, but they highlighted their track record of, navigating those uncertainties, operational agility, they called it.
Okay. So that brings us nicely to our, let's call it the "This is not financial advices" segment.
Right, our outrageous but plausible trade ideas. Remember, these are just thought experiments, not recommendations.
Absolutely not. Do your own research. Okay. What's idea number one?
Okay, thinking about Aplizna, first and only for IgG4-related disease, positive reception, potential approval coming in myasthenia gravis.
Both underserved areas.
Right. So the idea may be a long position in Amgen, but given the inherent risks, pair it with a tight stop loss, maybe just below recent lows.
The thesis being Aplizna could become a bigger franchise than currently priced in.
Potentially, yeah. Significant upside if it really takes off in these autoimmune conditions. But obviously, regulatory hurdles, market penetration, those are real risks.
Okay. Plausible, if definitely outrageous. Idea number two.
This one focuses on Maritide and the obesity space. We saw the promising phase 2 data. Phase 3 trials are starting.
And the market loves obesity treatments right now.
Intensely. So the idea here is maybe a pairs trade. Go long Amgen.
Okay.
And short a competitor whose obesity candidate maybe looks less differentiated or perhaps has more challenging tolerability issues shown in their data.
Betting on Maritide's potential competitive edge, like the less frequent dosing maybe.
Exactly. If that monthly or even less frequent dosing holds up in phase 3, along with strong efficacy, it could give Amgen an advantage.
But the big caveat.
Clinical trial outcomes are highly uncertain. Phase 3 could fail. Competition could leapfrog them. It's a high-risk, high-reward kind of scenario.
Definitely fits the outrageous but plausible bill. Okay, great stuff.
Okay. Remember, folks, just ideas for discussion.
Absolutely. So that wraps up our deep dive into the Amgen Q1 FY 2025 earnings call. We hit the strong revenue growth, key drug performance, the exciting pipeline developments in obesity, rare disease, oncology.
And touched on the financials, guidance, and of course those purely speculative trade thoughts.
So what stood out most to you listening in? Any questions still lingering about Amgen's path forward?
We'd love to hear your take.
Join the conversation. Let us know your thoughts. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of earnings calls.